If Bill would have sat down and tried to use quote unquote multi-step funneling, whatever that means, right, to his audience initially, he would have lost the momentum that he capitalized on, and he would have got 1/10 the result, even though his technical capabilities would have been 2 to 5 times more effective. And so once he's accrued an audience, once he's found something that they need that they can't get anywhere else, and he's served that audience, then he can go back and do the polishing of the stones and the minor optimization points. And so this is what I get into with audiences all the time. They want to fight me on it.
This is going to be amazing. You got a lot of people on this call today.
I think the biggest miss that people make in terms of selling it.
And that's what a good marketing message, good branding does.
How does somebody do something big in a very short period of time?
We're going to transition to the legend of webinars, the smartest guy in the room, in my opinion, when it comes to webinars.
No doubt about it.
And so many things. He's known as the $100 million webinar guy, webinar man. And he is just, it's speechless when I introduce him. It's the third time he's been on our show, and he's been so gracious with giving tactical tips to everyone. So Jason, thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, we're doing something I like to do today, which is Q&A. I always come presenting and spending hours and hours, and then people are like, hey, I just like it when you do the Q&A. So who am I to argue?
I'm curious, from a getting registrants perspective, and then also from a once they're on the webinar perspective, like what trends are you sensing in this new world that we live in?
Great question, Bill. So I don't tend to get super granular with the trends because they're not very useful to me. I try to take the macro view. And so the overall trend I'm seeing, period, amongst most consumer basis is a feeling of desperation. And I mean, you're on one hand, you're like, duh, obvious. But if a market is in a desperate state of mind, you need to communicate to that audience differently than you would under quote unquote normal times. So the type of marketing that you may model or draw inspiration from or study is not as on the nose as applicable in a market that is frenzy and desperate and freaked out and scared and overwhelmed. And that is where the market as a whole, I see it being right now, Bill. And so we have to speak towards the pains of the market more so than the pleasures of the market, if that makes sense.
No, it definitely does. That's a huge transition because, a lot of people in the world of webinars and really presentations is, in general, you want to sell all the positives, right? And what we were talking about with Myron for a few minutes was how to proactively handle objections. And that essentially could be framed in many different ways. You could proactively handle a price objection, proactively handle a time objection. But talk to me about how would you gear your content to become more empathetic?
Yeah. So, and empathetic is a good word. I think it's misunderstood because empathetic doesn't mean that you baby them or you handle them with children's gloves or that you allow them to get away with behavior that is unbecoming of your market. It just means that you can feel totally the challenge and stress that they're going through. But the way that I handle this is being very direct, very upfront. So I say to my audiences, hey, listen, it's hard right now. And who knows if it's going to get easier. If I had to bet on anything, I'm going to bet on it even being more challenging over the next 8 months. And in my, it's like that is counter messaging to pretty much any marketing that exists out there. But I don't do it. It's beneficial to be contrarian. It always is in marketing. It's better to be different than it is to be better. However, it's also, you want to speak to your audience's conversation that it's having in its mind. And this seems to do that. Most people shy away from this type of conversation, Bill, because they're afraid that if I overwhelm my prospect by acknowledging the harsh realities, that they'll somehow cower into a corner. They won't listen to me and they'll shut down. And maybe a small portion of the market does that. But what I found is an audience is very reciprocal to people who are telling it exactly how it conforms to what they're experiencing right now, as opposed to wishful thinking, wishy-washy towards kind of attitudes, which I don't think you ever have a place in marketing. But generally speaking, when people are sentimental or excited about the future, they will buy more into this wishful thinking. So it can be effective marketing. However, I find it now to be largely ineffective. So if we understand this trend, then we don't have to worry so much about show rates and registration rates and attentiveness and attendee rates. Because if we fix this larger problem, we will fix all those other problems.
So I have a question to kind of follow up on this. So there's certainly a growing use of alternative measures for people to connect with audiences, and so some people are testing out Zoom meetings instead of Zoom webinars, right? The Zoom meetings being, for those listening, where you can actually see everyone's face and it's in a group setting. So what are your thoughts on that? Because I feel like people are trying to get closer to that human connection. What are the pros and cons of using a Zoom meeting versus a one-to-many webinar like this?
Right. So this is, and I get into this with my clients all the time. I love it. It doesn't matter is what my answer is. It is way down on the list, in my opinion, of things that are going to move the needle in anybody's practice here. Knowing how to communicate in a way that can get your audience moving forward in a decision that's right for them. Far more important. Give me 2 tin cans with a string. And if I have the right messaging, I'm going to outsell and outperform people who are finding these micro tactical optimizations and improvements. Because the technology will change too. If Zoom meetings work great this month and everybody starts using them, they're not going to work well next month. They're going to be oversaturated. So finding the messaging first and foremost is way more important than anything else. But I know where these questions come from. People don't know what questions to ask. So they ask questions that are very real to them. I've been on meetings, I've been on webinars. Which one is better? Why? Like I'll give you a great example. Bill used Eventbrite. Are you still using Eventbrite, Bill?
No, thank God we're using multi-step funnels now.
Hemorrhaged
way too much.
I've never seen a marketer use Eventbrite to market webinars before. It is kind of silly. It really honestly is. But if Bill would have sat down and tried to use quote unquote multi-step funneling, whatever that means, right, to his audience initially, he would have lost the momentum that he capitalized on, and he would have got 1/10 the result, even though his technical capabilities would have been 2 to 5 times more effective. And so once he's accrued an audience, once he's found something that they need that they can't get anywhere else, and he's served that audience, then he can go back and do the polishing of the stones and the minor optimization points. And so this is what I get into with audiences all the time. They want to fight me on it. And it's okay. I'm here to help you. I'm not here to necessarily be friends with you, although I hope we could do both. But if I have to choose one, I'd rather help you.
Yeah. So I appreciate that. And that's a huge tip is just riding the wave, whatever it takes, whatever is most natural to kind of deliver value to your audience. And then we're even going to be pivoting the name of our event because we're getting a lot of people from other industries who want to attend. But had I done that in the beginning, it probably would have been too confusing. So that's a great point. I'm curious of your thoughts about Clubhouse.
Yeah, I think it can be a monumentally effective way to make short-term income. I am staying away from it with a 1,000-foot pole because I can see it also being very distractive and overwhelming. But I have a very clear mission and I have a very clear focus, and I'm very deliberate in what I do, and I'm very anti-social media, which is kind of ironic. But I got 5 friends on Facebook. I'm related to one of them, and the other ones all work for me. So there's lots of ways to the top of the mountain. So I think Clubhouse in the short term is going to make a lot of people get further along than they should. And I like that, right? This is a thing where your abilities are not necessarily as needed to grow very quickly. But oftentimes, because I've seen several cycles of this, like in internet years, I'm a dinosaur, right? I've seen several cycles of this where people who get an unnecessary advantage early on that they didn't necessarily earn generally give it back to the marketplace in time. So easy come, easy go. So if you can utilize Clubhouse to a greater purpose without allowing it to distract you, kudos to you. I don't feel like I can do that. So therefore, even though Clubhouse is going to make a bunch of people a bunch of money, I don't have this fear of missing out. So therefore, I'm like, that's cool. What I'm excited about, Bill, is all these people, once they get a Clubhouse audience, they don't know the fundamentals, the most important things. It's going to increase my demand. So the bigger Clubhouse gets, the more money I'm going to make, but not directly because I'm in Clubhouse.
Yeah, and I can tell you this because I've connected with a lot of the biggest accounts, and their biggest pain point is how do I pull people off of Clubhouse and convert through a webinar. So I could tell you for sure that that pain is already being felt just because of the sheer time investment on the app. So you know, we did just for a funny little thing we did a collaboration with Jay Abraham, and I
Yeah, good
got
friend of
like
mine.
so we got like five to 10 huge accounts to collaborate, and we had 1,100 people live at the peak of it. We had 4,000 live in a 2-hour chunk we did with Jay. So it's really fascinating, and it's also challenging to control the narrative, because with so many co-moderators on a stage of that size, inevitably someone's going to speak up and throw things off track. So it's really hard to gain control, I think, over your messaging on the app, but it certainly helps from a perspective of top of mind awareness. And, you know, certainly getting quality Instagram followers, because that's kind of where you message through it. But really, really interesting to hear your thoughts on it. So my question to you is getting registrants for webinars. What's
Yes.
changed? Because you're a huge proponent on email list. Has anything changed there?
Not from my perspective. And I don't think it should change from anybody's perspective either. If you're not doing webinars yet, and my guess is, Bill, our audience, a majority of them are not doing webinars on a consistent basis. Your goal is to get a registrant, not registrants. So what's the difference between a one-on-one and a one-to-many type of meeting? Just the number of people. But otherwise, if you can get one person on and you start with zero, we call it a huge success. And then turning one into two, you're doubling that. That's incredible. So I don't necessarily think a lot of people need to focus on how do I get a whole bunch of registrants. It's how do I get a few of the right people on? Because if you're traditionally, in most law practices that work on like a free consultative setting where they talk with one client, they sit down, 90% of the time it's the same stuff they say over and over again, right? If you can optimize that to where you can get 80% of that out of the way, but you can do that with 10 or 20 people at once instead of one at a time, you've just increased your capacity by 10 times. That's super effective. Just usage of your time and impact that you have, you can scale that up. You could double or triple your practice if you can find an efficient way to do that. So I don't think you need to say, how do I get all these registrants? You just say, how do I get the 10 people I would normally get anyway, get them all at once. So that way I don't have to start from scratch with each potential client on a one-to-one basis. And then if you save 100 hours, you know, a lawyer, I love a lawyer because they can bill out 2,000 hours worth of services in 100 hours, right? So 100 hours of savings for a lawyer is extra valuable than 100 hours of saving to us mere mortals here.